So the last time that we talked about Septicflesh was 3 years ago, their album The Great Mass. I looked pretty different back then, though the hair, for some strange reason, was around the same length. I guess if you're really wondering how long it took me to cut it or grow it or whatever, well, there you go, about 3 years. And I cut it for a wedding. So we're here to talk about their album Titan, which just came out, and there's a couple things about this that are kind of cool. First off, I highly doubt they mean Clash of the Titans or anything like that, so those of you who have that idea in mind, just get it out, so let's move on instantaneously. Secondly, if you purchase the deluxe version of this album, you get orchestral versions of all of the songs, which is really kind of neat, even though the basic edition of this album already has a lot of orchestration that's built into it. So, I mean, I guess it's just that it's orchestral as opposed to having, you know, the heaviness factor to it. I'm not exactly sure because I listen to just the standard edition. Either way, Septicflesh is a symphonic death metal band that actually hails from Greece. We all know who else hails from Greece. Yeah, Rotting Christ. In fact, Rotting Christ's keyboard player played with Septicflesh in the 1990s, which was kind of cool. So those two bands definitely have a bit of a link. There are also links to bands such as Firewind, because there was a time period where Septicflesh had broken up, and this was after, I think, their 2003 album. So they were on hiatus for about 4 years, and then this is their third album ever since. So let's get started. Now, Septicflesh is a band that's certainly gotten praise ever since their reformation, and really their first album, whenever they came back, Communion, got a high level of praise, mainly because it was unexpected that they were going to get back together, and then once they did, and the first album came out, it was really one that blew people away. The Great Mass, as I remember, was one that definitely continued on with the positivity. However, maybe not with the same magnitude as Communion did, but really, I think that's something that's in the ear of the listener. With Titan, I definitely hear a great and solid sound to it. It's a 10-track affair, and it's one where, unlike some other bands that really employ a lot of symphonics, this is one where you're not going to see too many tracks that eclipse, you know, the 6.5-minute mark. In fact, a lot of them are going to stick within the 3 to 5 minute range, and I definitely think that this is nice because whenever you listen to it, it flows together quite nicely, and it doesn't feel like any of the songs overstay their welcome or that the band tries to do way too much with the symphonic element. Now, I might actually have to retract that statement a little bit later on in the video, only because there are certain songs where it seems as though they try to do a little bit too much with it, but bear with me because there's kind of an explanation behind the whole thing. Now, with symphonic death metal, you definitely know what you're expecting. You have all those trademark death metal ideals that are being backed with a little bit of, you know, symphonic element, a symphonic orchestra, either that or, you know, symphonic instruments that really help back it up. It gives it a nice dense layering effect, not to mention it gives it a little bit more a clarity and creativity to it. It really gives you the opportunity to really, you know, make your point a little bit more clear, as opposed to it being one where it just feels way too direct and at some points in time, you know, relatively forced. The one thing I will say is that out of the 3 albums, one of the best songs that I have heard, and this is the 3 albums, of course, since the Reformation, one of the best Septicflesh songs that I have heard is actually off this record, and that's the track Prometheus. Immediately by the, you know, title of the song, I get flashbacks to Prometheus, the Discipline of Fire and Demise by Emperor, and this is definitely a song that, while it's not done in the black metal stylings that Emperor were able to really, you know, achieve, certainly has its own creativity to it, and it has just a great feel and atmosphere to it. Some people may also cite Confessions of a Serial Killer as one that definitely has a feel to it, as it definitely feels like you're, you know, watching a film or something and this is what's playing in the background. And really, if you remove the lyricism and everything, you could definitely see this being one of those keynote scenes where a serial killer is going through their process, or you learn exactly what makes them tick, and, you know, the suspenseful and eerie music that plays in the background definitely helps deliver that whole ideology and really helps enhance it. So, you know, it's one of those things where the music could easily be the setting point for, you know, a keynote portion of a feature film. That's the one aspect about symphonic elements towards death metal or black metal or really any style of metal that definitely works in its favor. Whenever it's done right, it's certainly one that really adds to that magnificence that, you know, the songs by themselves already are able to really dictate. Not to mention, this is also something where, on a musical level, you know, with your basics, you know, your guitars, your drums, your bass, you know, you don't necessarily have to, you know, go above and beyond the Call of Duty in order to really enhance something that, you know, or in order to really deliver something that you know, is going to blow away the audience by itself. Instead, with the additive of the symphonics, you can actually let that also create the mood and set the tone just as easily, which actually provides a little bit of additional backbone and support for the band, considering they're able to better dictate mood based around which instrument is getting the shine. It's not necessarily something where you have to, change up a guitar tone or something like that. You can instead use something like, a unique horn, either that or, the use of strings. So, with that being said, it's definitely one thing where the mood and the atmosphere of this album is already pretty well set. This is definitely an album that's gotten a lot of care being taken to it whenever it comes to that regard. Overall, the songwriting is pretty decent on this too. I have to definitely give it that. It's not something where I'm necessarily blown away by the entire thing. It's not something that's going to get a perfect score by any stretch of the imagination. At times I feel that the songwriting is a little bit lackluster and definitely has and bears in mind a lot of similar aspects, but what do you expect? This is definitely a band that knows its craft and definitely knows how to write good death metal music, and the one key aspect about death metal is that at times it can sound a little bit repetitive. It really is difficult in order to have a stone cold classic from, inception to, destruction, but the bands that are able to do that are really able to throw in a lot of, different aspects and different ideas in order to really captivate an audience. This is one where the captivation point definitely is enhanced by the fact that the symphony is, being used, and the stories definitely have some unique lyrical concepts. I mean, whenever you think about ideas such as dogma, war, and heaven, you're immediately thinking about religion. Whenever you think of prototype, you never know what you're thinking about. Burn could easily be about religion. Titan definitely has a huge mythological influence to it. Confessions of a Serial Killer talks about, exactly what it states. Ground Zero can mean anything from, 9/11 to any other significant event, Ground Zero being the center point of it. And the first immortal is definitely something that could be talking about the first evolution of a god, perhaps Zeus, perhaps, a creator. It all depends on, what direction the lyrics were really meant to go in, and it's open to a little bit of interpretation. Now, the pitfalls is sometimes that the symphonic element definitely seems to be more of a crutch than a tool that's being used to kind of bolster things up. It's something where it gets, a little bit too much of the attention, and at times they do tend to deviate into some pretty weird elements. And, with the one thing with classical music, whenever you listen to that, is that, the instruments are really supposed to point the mood, but also help progress the story. And this is something where I think they're trying to do that a little bit, but it's unclear as to where they're trying to go. It's something where casual listeners may not necessarily know where the turning point or, really what the true purpose of some of these sections are, or what they are. However, to the musicians themselves and to those who, study albums such as this with, just fierce fervor, may be able to actually dictate all of those and kind of recognize turning points, either that or different settings. So I think that this is something that will turn off the casual listener, but at the same time, I don't necessarily think that Septicflesh is, aiming to sell 1 million records, though I'm sure it would be nice. Overall, this album has a nice vibe to it, and I definitely dig the fact that there are so many different elements that can really be fished through on this. I feel this is an album that you could easily explore and examine for, ages and months, and really still feel like you can find something that's a little bit new on it. And, whenever you have that returnability, factor that's added in, that replayability factor, then you definitely have a strong one. I would give this one a 78 out of 100. I definitely praise a lot of the different instrumentalization. I love the storytelling, not to mention, I feel as though it has just a really strong vibe to it, and this band has really just been on a roll ever since they've come back. They're just really one of those solid acts out of Greece, and, whenever you consider some of the company that they have, and of course I'll throw around Rotting Christ's name once again, then you definitely have to be on your A game with every album, and it definitely feels like they did a lot of things right on this disc. So, what do you guys think about Titan from Septicflesh? Bonafide classic, or just one that's kind of in the middle of the road? What are your thoughts on Rotting Christ, and who's better, Rotting Christ or Septicflesh? Let me know in the comments, and I'll talk to you guys next time.